Close your eyes. Think back to when you were a child. You had dreams, big ones. One of those big dreams was going to the Olympics someday. Every year, you and your family gather around the TV and watch the USA's women's gymnastics team vault, spin, flip, and fly through the air. And all you can think is, one day, I'll be there. But little do you, or your family, or the world know the dark secrets that are looming behind the smiles and the cheers of the crowd, the shadow of a monster lurking in plain sight. Someone who is supposed to help and heal, not hurt, yet his dark presence still stings the world today, all these years later. Welcome to my house. My name is HEXE, and I have found a story that I and ended up going down a rabbit hole, and now I'm here to share it. So the other day I was on Netflix and came across this true crime doc called Athlete A. And I had heard of it in passing many years ago. Or I shouldn't say many years ago, that makes me sound old. I'm really not that old. But several years ago, I had heard of it in passing and uh, but never sat down and watched it. Now, I sat down and started reading the description and realized that there was something familiar about um, the case or about what was being said in the description. And I started watching. Y'all. Let me tell you, when I say I got swept up into this true crime documentary, the story all over again, I literally mean that. Because here's why this sounded familiar. This case broke back in like 2016, 2018, and I was in college then. So I remember seeing stories about it. I remember people on campus talking about it. And so that's why this sounded really familiar. And I remember reading about this. So this documentary, is about the Larry Nassar scandal. Now, I am going to take a moment and say this really quickly. This story talks about SA, child SA, DARVO. There is going to be a mention of unaliving and possible PA. I will do my best to censor these topics out of respect for my audience and the victims and survivors in this story. If you or someone you know ever finds yourself in any situation that is anything like what will be talked about in this story, please know there are resources out there that can help you. And know that you are not alone. All right, let's dive into it. Larry Nassar, born Lawrence Gerald Nassar, was brought into this world on August 16th, 1963. As of today, he is 61 years old and he is currently residing in a federal correctional facility. He graduated from the University of Michigan and then he went on to Michigan State University. He was married with 3 kids. He was an osteopathic, I believe is how you say it, physician and professor. He was active from 1993 to 2016 and was employed by the USA Gymnastics. Larry Nassar was then charged and convicted of federal crimes, include, including child porn, child SA, at least 10 counts. I had trouble finding the exact charges, so this is a very broad stroke. In Michigan, he was also convicted of first degree SA, and he was and basically once all these charges and the trial and everything happened, he was basically sentenced to life in prison on February 5th, 2018. Now, how did we end up here? That is an excellent question. Let's get into it. So, there are a lot of moving parts to this story. So, let's start with the obvious one. We're going to start with Mr. Larry himself. He came into the world in Farmington Hills, Michigan on August 16th, 1963, to a Catholic family. In 1978, he began working as a student athletic trainer for the women's gymnastic team at North Farmington High School. Then in 1981, Nassar graduated from high school. He then went on to earn his bachelor's degree in kinesiology, I believe is how you pronounce it, at the University of Michigan in 1985. Now, what is kinesiology? I'm so glad you asked because I Googled it. Kinesiology is the scientific study of human movement. It encompasses the physical, psychological, and mechanical aspects of how the body moves, exploring the mechanics, anatomy, and the impact of physical activity on health and well being. So basically, it makes sense that he would eventually take an interest, or he did take an interest, I should say, in this line of study or area of study because he was working as a student trainer in high school, so he probably already had some interest on that front. Now, I will say that there is this little caveat to this entire story because no one really knows except for him and when he first started essaying and doing things that he shouldn't. I personally suspect he probably was showing signs at an early age of some kind, because statistically, and there's a lot of literature and research out there that suggests that perpetrators such as him, such as Nassar, um, start at an early age. They demonstrate that there are signs and indicators. Now, honestly, back then, there wasn't nearly as much research done and not as many things known about serial predators, pedophiles, etc., etc. But there was still some stuff. Um, out there and then there's also the fact that there's just sometimes some common sense things out there that in hindsight you go, oh yeah, that tracks. But I would also say like if you a good example of kind of not knowing would be like if someone were in a cult or if someone was entrapped by a serial killer, for example. There wouldn't necessarily, like, a lot of serial killers and cult leaders come across as normal human beings at first. Jim Jones, I won't say Charles Manson. There was nothing normal about Charles Manson in even the loosely used uh, definition of normal. Nothing normal about Charles Manson. I mean, Ted Bundy's a good example as well because, I mean, he even had a fiance. He had a normal life. Green River Killer, another good example. The Happy Face Killer. If you've not seen that documentary series, that is a very fascinating. I believe it's on Paramount Plus. I would encourage you to check that out. And if you want me to do a video on the Happy Face Killer, please let me know and keep it cute in the comments. Anyway, I digress. Then, a year later in 1986, Nassar began working with the U.S. national gymnastics team. A few years later, he volunteered at the Olympic trials for the U.S. team and started working at the Twistars Gymnastics Club near Lansing? I don't know how you say it. Um, which was owned by John Gildart. I believe is how you say his name. We will be returning to him later. And I also want to point out that make sure you um keep that date in your head for later. 1988 is when he started working at Twistars Gym. Okay. Remember, we know today that Larry Nassar is a serial child predator. And we know he did things, and we know there were a lot of things he did that didn't just happen overnight. And so that's why I was talking about like Ted Bundy and other people a moment ago, is because even with serial killers and known offenders and everything, there is no way to know exactly how many victims there were, especially when you're dealing with large gaps of time, and especially since you're because he started at Twist Stars in 1988. Okay? So keep that in mind. Okay? Because that's important for later. And also, like I said, John Gildart, whatever his name is, we'll get to him later. Okay? So keep all this in mind. In the same year, he enrolled in medical school at, uh, I believe it was Michigan State, was where he um, enrolled at. Let me double check. Yeah, Michigan State University is where he got his doctorate, uh, doctoral degree. Okay, English is hard, y'all. All right. Then in 1992, while still in medical school, according to the Detroit News, Nassar assaulted his earliest known victim. And from there, he didn't stop until he was finally caught. Okay. So you remember I said 1988, right? It wasn't until 1992 that someone actually came forward or actually said something. Now, I couldn't find who that victim was, um, because they were a minor at the time, and so I'm not for sure who that would have been. And I'm not going to, you know, invade someone's privacy if they don't want their privacy invaded. So I'm just making a point. He started working at Twistars in 1988, and then his first known victim was in 1992. And like I said earlier, we don't know exactly when he started his trail of deception and criminal activity. All right, now on that note, remember, he kept going until he was caught. So on the note of him getting caught, let's talk about it. A very brave woman named Rachael Denhollander, I believe, or Hollander, I believe is how you say her last name, came forward and publicly accused Nassar of SAing her as a child. She is a former gymnast. She has received the Inspiration of the Year award from Sports Illustrated, a joint recipient of ESPN's Arthur Ashe Courage Award, and she was also named Michigan of the Year by the Detroit News, along with numerous other awards. Rachael is also a lawyer, author, advocate, and educator. The amount of strength it took for her to come forward and tell her story is unprecedented. In 2016, she filed a criminal complaint against Nassar, which is a big deal. Not only is she coming forward and talking forward and taking on a very powerful person, but a very powerful organization as well. Once her criminal complaint started moving through the system, more former patients of Larry Nassar started coming forward with stories of their own about the damage and abuse that Larry Nassar had caused. I cannot stress enough how important it is to acknowledge what Rachael did. Okay? Because she not only gave a voice to herself, but she gave a voice to all of the victims in this case. And that is a very important thing to understand. She is a very strong woman for doing this. And if you go watch the Netflix documentary on this, she came with receipts. She managed to get all kinds of documentation, and she literally had built a case against Larry Nassar. And her attorney and herself were able to file a criminal complaint. Now, we'll talk about DARVO and stuff later, but it was 2016 before anyone had the courage or the ability to come. And like I said earlier, we cannot downplay that Rachael is amazing. We cannot downplay the fact that she has amazing strength and is an incredible person for doing what she did. Rachael, if this comes across your YouTube, thank you so much for doing what you did. All right. Now, we have to keep all of that information in our mind as we move forward, because there are other people and other moving parts to this story that we need to talk about. Okay? Because I think there are more people at fault than just Larry Nassar. And I have opinions. I will sprinkle my opinions throughout. So, let's get into this. I'm talking about Steve Penny for okay. I am talking about Steve Penny. He was the president and CEO of USA Gymnastics from 2005 until 2017, and he was a key figure in the USA Gymnastics sex abuse scandal. Okay? He was the president and CEO of the organization. I will explain why later, but I think he needed to be held accountable for his actions and the actions of his employee. And like I said, I will get into that in a minute. But I'm driving home the fact that Steve Penny was the president and the CEO. Okay? So, let's get into the next person. So you remember me talking about Twistar's gymnastics? Yeah, John Geddert. He was the owner of that gym. Yeah, he was the owner of the gymnastics club. I have opinions. I will get to them. But he was the owner of the gym that Larry Nassar started working at in 1988. Need I, right? I'm not the only one thinking it. All right. He was also and this is a big deal too, okay? Because he was also the coach of the Fierce Five. Okay. The Fierce Five were five female uh gymnasts who competed in I believe it was the 2012 gold or Olympic Games, and they all won gold in their respective sport. And I will talk about them later, but Johnny Boy over there was the coach. So not only was he the coach of the Olympic team that Larry Nassar was working for, but he was also the owner of the gymnastics club and gym that Larry Nassar was working for as well. Yeah. Again, I will get to him in a minute. The organizations involved, I believe they're also at fault. The USA Gymnastics Association, 100%. The university in Michigan, I believe it was Michigan State University that Larry Nassar was also working at the time. They should be someone should be held accountable there. I actually found a YouTube clip. I included it in my sources in the description below. Um, there's actually a YouTube video that dives into it. It's about half an hour, but the president of the university at the time basically swept all kinds of complaints under the rug. So those are two organizations right there that should be held accountable. All of these people were in, and here's why. Here's why I say this, okay? All of these people were in close proximity with Larry Nassar. And if you watch the Netflix documentary, it talked about the fact that Steve Penny knew what Larry Nassar was doing and did not tell the authorities. I would also like to say the training ranch that they were at, Larry Nassar also worked there, where the gymnasts would train in order to try out for the Olympics. And it's in the middle of backwoods, but nowhere in Texas. It's very isolated. You would have to know where to find it. But it's in the middle of nowhere in Texas, and it and there were trainers there. Uh, in the Netflix documentary, there is a interview with a choreographer, um, who does talk about Larry Nassar and does talk about the atmosphere at the ranch, but he doesn't disclose whether or not he knew anything. I don't think. I don't remember. It's been a minute since I watched that interview. But my point is, the other people that were there were the coaches. Bella, uh, Bella, I believe is how you say his name, and Martin. Both of them were married and were the owners of the ranch. They were trainers, and they were also coaches for the Olympics. And I'm not really going to talk about them a whole lot, because here's the thing. There are, from what I saw, there was too much disconnect between them and like Steve Penny and some of the other players. And I also want to actually like dive into them a little bit more, because I have questions and I have no answers. So I'm willing to do a whole separate video on them if you want me to. Just comment in the comment section below and just keep it cute. Anyway, we're getting into Steve Penny. I can't believe I had to dedicate as much real estate in my head to this man as I did. So let's get into it so I don't have to think about him anymore. How about we go ahead and talk about it? Let's do it. All right. So, Steve Penny. In the Netflix documentary, there are interviews with survivors, their parents, and authorities, uh, lawyers, uh, detectives, and at least one DA, assist, district attorney. There we go. I will get my acronyms figured out eventually. All right. And they were involved in the investigations once Rachel's complaint started going through. I bring this up for a very important reason. This is because one of those interviews is with Gina Nicholas. She is Maggie Nicholas's mother. She alleges that she and others told Penny about the abuse, and he told her that he would take care of telling the authorities. We now know, because of many sources, that he most likely knew about the issue and did nothing. One of the reasons I am very inclined to believe that he knew about the allegations that Larry Nassar um, was abusing gymnasts is one, he was the president and CEO at the time. Not only that, one of Larry Nassar's victims has gone on the record in the Netflix docu-series saying Steve Penny knew about these allegations, and she herself talks about Gina talks about having conversations with Steve Penny about what to do, and I don't remember word for word what was said, so please go watch the documentary. But basically, what I remember her saying was that Steve Penny and her had a conversation, and she was like, we need to call the authorities, because this is illegal, right? And this is my daughter. I'm going to do what I need to do to protect my daughter. But Steve Penny told her, oh, no, 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 don't worry about it, I will take care of it. And as far as anyone knows, he did jack of all trades about it. I said it. Okay. Then here's the biggest red flag for me. Okay. And I need to stress to y'all, especially if you don't know. Okay. Congress investigated. Congress got involved. Okay. Let me explain to y'all. If Congress calls you before a hearing committee or anything, or says we're investigating you, this is a huge, 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 huge deal. Like, I cannot stress that enough. And so he did go before Congress. There wasn't much he could do about not going before them. But he spent the whole time saying something along the lines of, thank you, Mr. Congressman, or thank you, Mr. Chairman, for your question, but on the advice of my attorney, I am not going to answer any questions. And he spent his entire time, which was like, I believe, 5 or 10 minutes, on repeat, like a broken record, doing that. Okay. So that, like innocent till proven guilty, but that looks bad, right? Just saying. Now, here's the other thing, okay? And here's my other big red flag with Steve Penny. Allegedly, he had a third party buy a suitcase, fill it with evidence from the training ranch, and take it to him in Indianapolis, where the headquarters were. And everything I said, no one knows where that evidence went. So, that's another reason he ended up. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyway, supposedly Penny had. Okay, so like I said, supposedly he had a third party buy a suitcase, a brand new suitcase, fill it up with evidence, and to bring it to him in the headquarters in Indianapolis. Supposedly, Penny did that after he somehow found out the Texas Rangers were going to serve a search warrant on the Karolyis Ranch in Texas. Okay? Let that sink in. Somehow he found out, allegedly, allegedly, he allegedly somehow found out that there was going to be a warrant on the ranch by the Texas Rangers, and he had someone go and get evidence and ship it across state lines. Okay? Let that sink in. We'll get to, like I said earlier, we'll get to Bella and Marta Karolyi probably in a different video if you want it, because like I said earlier, I have questions about them and I don't have answers yet. But all you need to know for now for this doc, for this video, is that they owned the ranch and they were also the coaches there. Okay. Anyways, back to Steve Penny. So once Larry Nassar's crimes were brought to light, there was a lot of backlash, of course. Steve Penny was eventually arrested and charged for impeding the investigation, basically. Now, but he was let go and the charges were dropped because there was a lack of evidence. Now, as you probably can tell, I have opinions on this. First, and I'm going to make this very clear, you can find this on YouTube. I found it, but and you need to go look it up. And I know I was talking about it earlier, but this is why I said I was getting ahead of myself earlier. But if you go on YouTube and you look up his testimony, it's literally just like a 10-minute video of him saying, "Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Congressman, for your excellent question. I wish I could answer, but I can't on the advice of my attorney, blah, 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 blah." Now, here's the thing. Congress wanted answers from him. He was the president. He was the CEO. There are, at the time, and even today, there are allegations that he knew about what was happening and did nothing. So when Congress comes knocking on your door and wants answers, yeah. So anyway, I also did not realize that a hearing in front of Congress had happened in this case until I started digging into it. So, and they wanted answers, and I gotta be honest, I can't blame them. I want answers too. All right. Here's the thing. This is my opinion. Okay. In my humble opinion, he knew what Larry Nassar was doing. But metals and money were more important to him than the well-being of his gymnast. I said it. Okay. Whew. Okay. Now that we are done talking about that man, that stain on the earth, allegedly, because I am so over giving him real estate in my head. I really am. Okay, so let's move on. There's a lot about this that doesn't make sense, but I digress. In the following months, years, there were a lot of investigations into the ranch, Steve Penny, Larry Nassar, and many other people associated with Larry Nassar. And one of those people was John Geddert. Remember him? Remember me mentioning him? Oh yeah, we gonna talk about him because mm, hard side eye. You're looking over the top of my glasses. Mm, If you know, you know. Why is he brought into this? Well, because he owned the gym where Larry Nassar worked for years. Remember what I said earlier? He started working there in 1988. His first known accusation was in 1992. Okay? Rachel's complaint was in 2016. That those are very long time differences. We're talking months, years. And he was also the and like I said, we're going to talk about them and we're going to talk about him. He was also the coach of the Fierce Five in the USA women's gymnastics team that won gold in 2012. The Fierce Five were Gabby Douglas, Mckayla Maroney, Allie Raisman, Kayla Ross, and Jordan Weber, all of whom came out later as victims of Larry Nassar. The reason why this is important to note is because John Geddert worked very closely with Larry Nassar for many years, both in and out of the Olympics. There were also allegations and speculations that good old Johnny boy over there knew of the abuse that was happening. He was eventually charged with human trafficking, SA, racketeering, and lying to a police officer. He was facing 20 counts of forced labor and human trafficking. However, he self-unalived hours after the charges were filed. Here are the charges. Here are the alleged lies to police. Okay, remember remember the time frame I gave you: 1988, 1992. We're going to insert 2012 in there and 2016. Okay? Keep those dates in mind when I read this. Okay? Nassar's role as a team physician at Twistars. I'm looking sideways at him. Saying he had never heard of any complaints about Nassar's treatments. Y'all, 1992, first known complaint. He was still working there in 1992. Here's another one. Uh, mm, mm. Denying he was aware of any athletes receiving invasive or improper treatments at Twizzlers. He was the owner. The owner. It, mm, he was the owner. Anyone else in anyone else in here going, this ain't adding up? Because I don't care if you're a hands-off owner. If someone even whispers about something like that, you're going to hear about it as the owner, even if it's a rumor. You're going to hear. Sorry. Sorry. Now, this one I'm a little fuzzy on because I in the Netflix documentary, there's some talk about this, and then in um resources I saw online and in interviews online, I saw some talk about this. So I'm not entirely for sure how this fits in to all of this, but supposedly he also claimed no males were allowed in the female locker room to police. Now, wild thought here, crazy thinking here, okay? Um Males shouldn't be allowed in the female locker room anyway, right? Like especially if you're dealing with minors, right? I mean, like I said, it like there was one story I saw that said that there was a back room in Twist Stars that um Larry Nazar would um you know treat people in, but that's alleged. I never found was able to 100% nail down, yes, this is what we're talking about here. Does that make sense? And that's why I phrase it the way I did. All right, so he was charged. Okay, so keep that in mind. The human trafficking charges were tied to the forced labor resulting in injury to at least 19 athletes, most of whom were minors at the time. 19 athletes who were minors who were injured. Okay? Those trafficking charges allegedly occurred between 2008 and 2018. Okay? He could have spent up to 20 years for the 6 charges regarding minors and up to 15 for the other 14 charges that were filed. According to an article by Lansing State Journal, Lindsay Le- Lemick, Lemick, I, I'm sorry, I'm not trying to mispronounce that um in at all, who was one of the women named in the complaint against John Geddert, however you say this man's name. Honestly, I'm just gonna at this point start calling him J G J. At this point, I'm just gonna start calling him Jerk or something like that. Said to finally see the day. It's like hallelujah. I don't even know how someone can get away with these things for as long as he did. But it was all things we personally lived through. This was our childhood. Later on in the article, it indicates that Lindsay was surprised by the human trafficking charges at first, but after hearing the explanation as to why those charges were um, made against him, it clicked and made sense because they did travel to competitions. And Jerkface was making money off of those competitions. Not just, medals for having winning teams or what have you, but he was also, sorry, my hair is not cooperating. Anyway, sorry about that. He was making money, not just medals for having winning teams, but he was also making money off of these teams that were competing. So yeah, and the a lot of these competitions, if you know anything about gymnastics, a lot of these competitions are, out of state. So if, your home gym is in Michigan and you go and compete in Florida, that is well across state lines. And if you're making money, that's technically trafficking. In that, in this instance, it's technically trafficking. Okay. And Jerkface was also using that money for the club, yes, but he's still making money off of injured athletes. If you think about it, if you're injured on the job, but your boss continues to force you to work, you're that's lawsuit material right there, right then and there. Boom, lawsuit. But because they were minors, they felt they really couldn't say anything, you know? And the other thing that was mentioned in at least one article was that Larry Nassar would actually go on those out of state competitions with the team. And we're talking girls who are minors, you know? I'm just putting that out there. All right. So now that we've covered that unfortunate stain on existence, let's do a little breakdown here because there is always going to be that question that is asked. Why didn't anyone come forward? Okay. Let me be very, very, very clear. Okay. 1988, 1992, 2012, 2016. Specifically 1992. People were coming forward. People were making complaints. But those people in power who could do something about this did nothing. They did nothing. So, we're going to dive into this a little bit. While to an outsider, it seems very simple, right? Go to the police, call someone. But when you're in the situation that these parents and these minor underage athletes are in, you're the authority in that world is, the coach, or let's say the president and CEO. Like it's not as simple as someone on the outside of this situation would want to make it seem. It's a lot harder because not only are you dealing, well, I'll get into that. Hold on. Okay. Because I was already kind of leading into this excuse me, a little bit, but there's something that sticks out in the story. From top to bottom, left to right, sideways, three ways to Sunday. Here's what sticks out is the fact that there was abuse written all over it. There was physical abuse, emotional abuse, sexual, I'll say SA. There was, if you're familiar with DARVO, which I will get into, but abuse of power. and a bunch of other stuff, psychological. Like all of this stuff is written all over this. So let me explain. First, you have Larry Nassar, right? He is a well known doctor. He is respected in his field at this point in time, and he's established himself as sort of a caregiver for the gymnast and as someone who would be there for them when no one else would. The ranch in Texas, for example, one of the things that I saw in one of the videos was that, and they talked about it in the Netflix documentary as well, is that there were very strict rules about food and diet and stuff in when you were at the ranch, and Larry Nassar would sneak food to the gymnasts, the ones that he favored. He The other thing was there was strict communication with the outside world, and Nassar would use that to his advantage. He also would you know, try and be that friendly face. Because let's face it, sometimes coaches aren't the most friendly. Sometimes athletes are put into situations they should never be put in, and they need a friendly face. And he took advantage of that. Hi, hello there. Future Heeks here, or I should say sidebar. I really wanted to take a second because to address something because I realized while I was editing that I didn't do a good job of addressing something. So, or well, really two things. But the first one is just real quick. Yes, Larry Nazar worked for a university, Michigan State University, okay? And the president at the time did very much sweep it under the rug and created a environment where Nazar basically was able to get away with what he got away with, and there were a bunch of other things. Now, I am willing to dive into that side of this story a little bit more in a different video, but for right now, I'm not going to be going deep into that. Now, the other thing I realized I did not do a very good job of addressing was Larry Nazar's behavior when it comes to how he was able to pull people or pull gymnasts into his web, if you will. And I also realized while editing that the way I presented it made it sound like, oh, no one can be nice anymore. That's not true. You can be nice. So I figured I needed to clarify that what Larry Nazar did was grooming. Grooming is something that predators do on a regular basis in order to basically manipulate and pull their victims to them. So I figured I would give a quick little breakdown of what grooming is before I continue on with this story. So the psychological effects of grooming. In Grooming specifically in the context of manipulation and exploitation, often actual, has a range of devastating and long lasting psychological effects on its victims. These effects stem from the insidious nature of grooming, which involves building trust and emotional dependency while simultaneously isolating the victim and undermining their sense of self. So that's what Larry Nazar was doing. at the ranch specifically. When he would basically smuggle the gymnasts like food when he wasn't supposed to, for example, or he presented himself as someone that they could go to for help. Said this was just a little quick tidbit about grooming and the importance of making sure to clarify that what Larry Nassar did was grooming. Um, and not to, you know, freak out and be like, oh my God, this person's being nice to me, so that's clearly grooming. No, no, no. People, there are legitimately nice people out there in this world. However, there are also the Larry Nassars out there in this world. So it's just a matter of educating, doing your own research, and also just being aware of what's going on. Anyway, like I said, now back to this is future Heeks or sidebar Heeks, whichever you want to call me. So anyway, let's get back to the, actual video now. And that's classic manipulation. And it's I'm not saying you can't be nice to people, but the thing is, what is your intention behind it? In Nassar's case, it was he wanted to lure his victims in. He was also in a position of authority, okay? Which makes it even worse, even harder for someone to come forward. He, like I said earlier, he is the well-known, well-liked doctor, and if he really wanted to, he could spin it to where that person is who's making the complaint is not stable, or even make it to where that gymnast could no longer medically compete for the Olympics or something like that. Then when someone did come forward, they were brushed aside and told not to worry about it. I am in fact talking about Steve Penny. He had every opportunity to do the right thing, and yet he did not. He did not call the police. He did not even so much as, say to the authorities, hey, I have a question. Does this sound right to you? You can do that. Finally, as far as anyone knows, that's all allegedly. As far as anyone knows, he never did. Okay? And anytime he was asked, he made parents and victims feel like they were overreacting, and anytime he was asked more directly, he basically made up excuses, allegedly, as far as anyone knows. Finally, the biggest reason people didn't come forward is because of the imbalance of the relationships, the power dynamics that were at play. The victims did not come forward because that could affect their chance at the Olympic team. It could affect their standings with the people in power, and they felt they couldn't say anything without repercussions. That is called a DARVO relationship. DARVO, DARVO, is a manipulative tactic used by individuals or institutions to deflect blame and responsibility. When accused of wrongdoing, the acronym stands for Deny, Attack, Reverse Victim, and Offender. It involves denying the accusations, attacking the accuser's credibility, then portraying themselves as the victim. Deny. The accused denies the allegations against them, refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing. Do I need to even get into how? Yeah. Attack. They had the power. They were a powerful organization. Steve Penny had the power in his hands. Okay, so Steve Penny literally had the power in his hands, right? He was the president and CEO of the women's gymnastics. And instead of, doing the correct thing and addressing the issue, whether it was investigate anything wayward himself or, call in authorities, what does this man do? He does nothing except push the family's concerns to the side, push the athlete's concerns to the side, and continue on as if nothing happened. And when something was said and when something was done, he made his gymnasts and their families, I say his because he was the president and CEO, feel as if they didn't, as if their concerns were invalidated. Your concerns were 100% valid, and this should have been handled so differently. Now, I'm not even going to get into the law enforcement side of this because that's a whole nother can of worms. And this is just focusing specifically on Larry Nassar and what what occurred. This is just the baseline for the most part. Okay. Now, remember, we're talking about DARVO, so deny. Um, Steve Penny, the man literally made families feel like they were going crazy. Attack. Well, first, deny. I'm pretty sure I've already read it, but I'm going to read it again. Deny. The accused denies the allegations against them, refusing to acknowledge any wrongdoing. What did he do? He did that. Attack. The accused attacks the accuser's character, credibility, or motives, trying to make them look bad. Again, I'm pretty sure I've already said that, but just to reiterate, Steve Penny had the power in this situation. The organization he was in charge of had the power. The coaches at the ranch where Larry Nassar had his power. This was such a strong power imbalance on a massive scale. I cannot stress that enough. Finally, reverse victim and offender. The accused portrays themselves as the real victim and not the accuser as the. Let me try that again because I just realized I stumbled over my words. The accused portrays themselves as the real victim and the accuser as the aggressor, further shifting the blame. Okay? I don't know if I can make this clearer. The concerns of the athletes and of their families were pushed aside, and when there was any kind of conversation or anything, um, the the victims and their families were made to feel like they were the problem, not that something was wrong, or they were made to feel as if something was being done about it, yet nothing was actually in reality being done about it. So I cannot stress to you enough that DARVO is real. And this case as a whole is a huge, huge example of what happens in that kind of relationship. Finally, here are my final thoughts on this case. Larry Nassar thankfully did get caught, and and was found guilty, but it shouldn't have taken years for it to happen. There were too many other people in the web of junk and lies that could have and should have done more. There are a few people I think should have been held accountable. But what do you think? Keep it cute in the comments. As always, I encourage you to do your own research, and as always, create credit is due to the survivors. The very brave and strong women that came forward to tell their stories, to share with the world the heartbreaking things that happened to them. Those things should have never happened. Their childhoods were marred by the actions of adults. Those adults should have and could have done better. And I just want to say thank you, not just from myself, but for all those other but for all of the other people out there in the world that are looking for that strength and that power to be able to come forward and tell their stories. So thank you to the survivors who told their stories. Thank you to Rachael for being the spearhead of all of this. And like I say, I just want to say thank you, and all of you, all of the survivors. I just want to say thank you, and your strength and your courage to come forward, as I said earlier in this video, is unprecedented. And I hope that now that Nassar is in prison, um, that you guys received justice, and I hope y'all have found peace of some kind. And I don't know what that looks like. I know it's different for every person, but I know that it's a powerful, powerful thing when you have that moment of courage. So thank you. Okay, I need a breather or something after that. I will be looking into other cases to do videos on. If you have suggestions, let me know. Put them in the comments below. Keep it cute. I am planning on doing more videos in regards to some of these other people in the story, but until then, keep it cute, and thank you for coming to my house. I know that Victoria will be back in a little bit, or in a few weeks or so, once the NFL season starts up again. So make sure you stay tuned. I also want to take a second to acknowledge that I am not the sports person on this channel by no means, but Victoria did ask me to acknowledge that the Panthers won the um, Stanley Cup, and as we're Carolina Hurricanes fans, yeah, we're kind of salty about it, but it's been long enough that the sting is no longer there. So anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope it was educational, and I also hope that you were able to take something from it. And yeah, so anyway, like I said, thank you. My name is HEXE, and thank you so much for coming to my house.